Movies Till Dawn continue on Channel 5 with Island of Lost Souls.
Welcome to Movies Till Dawn, a new podcast that's a safe space for filmmakers to talk about the fascinating and exasperating and always unusual and never quite the same thing twice process of creating motion pictures. I'm Raymond and I'm the show's Toastmaster General. The great film director Peter Bogdanovich died on January 6th of this year, which is 2022, and I'm recording this on January 20th. Which means just a few weeks later, and I'm still feeling the pain of it because Peter was a close friend of mine for 20 years. I'm honored to be able to say that. He was a wonderful friend to have, too. He was supportive, he was charming, he was inspirational, and he was also a much misunderstood guy, I think, in some circles, or maybe in a lot of circles. He had an extraordinary career, and if you're listening to this podcast, you probably know that. You probably know The Last Picture Show and Paper Moon and Mask and What's Up, Doc. And those are just the hits. There's plenty other stuff that he directed. He was also a film historian and journalist. And if I'm not mistaken, he was really the first of the American film directors to come from film history. That was more common. Well, so for instance, the French New Wave filmmakers, Godard, Truffaut, began as film fans and enthusiasts and writers and turned themselves into filmmakers. That was an unusual thing, though, for an American to do. The general feeling in America was that movie directors were tough guys and they didn't really care for the movies, but they went out there and got paid and they knocked them over and they yelled at actors and they grinded them out. And that was sort of the kind of BS macho version of what a movie director was. And Peter kind of upended all that by being an unabashed fan and writing about it and interviewing filmmakers who he admired so he could learn from them. His essays on actors, which are wonderful, are collected in a book called Who the Hell Is in It? And his essays or his interviews with directors are collected in a terrific book called Who the Devil Made It? These are two books that you have to have on your shelf if you're into the movies. So there's a lot of Peter information out there and a lot of recordings, interviews of Peter. There's a deep dive. It's a podcast that Peter did just a couple years ago with Ben Mankiewicz called I'm Still Peter Bogdanovich. And so, I can't add much to that. You don't need me to add much to that. But I can add something to Peter's legacy that I don't think anyone else can. And that's the fact that Peter was a singer. And an enthusiastic singer. He loved the music of the 1930s and 40s. And I know this because I was his accompanist. You can find a CD that's out there. You can find it on YouTube, actually, called Monday Morning Quarterbacks. And it's Peter singing, and it's me playing the piano. So how did this oddity come about? What was behind? What's the story behind all that? Well, I'll sketch it in for you a little bit, and then I'm going to play you some audio. I'm not going to play. I'll play you some, excerpts of the actual CD. But what I'm going to be playing you is a conversation Peter and I had back when we were making the CD, which was in 2002, I guess. Basically, here's the beginnings of the story. A very good friend of mine, Tom Hayes, was the son of the legendary magazine editor Harold Hayes. Esquire magazine was his very important magazine that he edited, and he was the first person to hire Peter as a journalist. He sent him to L.A. Peter was in his early 20s, and that's where Peter first started meeting people like Alfred Hitchcock and John Ford and Cary Grant and Jerry Lewis. And Howard Hawks. And so that really began Peter's career. Well, 20 years later, when Tom, Harold's son, was about 21, 22 years old, Peter hired him to work as his assistant on his movie They All Laughed. And another 20 years later, it turned out that both Tom and Peter lived in the same neighborhood on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And they bumped into each other. And it turns out I lived in the same neighborhood at that time, too. Now, I'm not going to bother to go any further with this story because it's part of this audio that I'm going to play of me and Peter having this conversation. It was recorded because Tom decided, thank God, to make an actual kind of record of us making the CD together. And it exists. It's out there, and it's called Directors Unplugged. I think right now it's not online because Tom's doing some work on it and intends to put it out there more professionally and to a wider audience. But I do have this hour or so of conversation, and you're going to hear it in two parts. And like I said, I'm going to drop a few excerpts of the music in. I think you'll find Peter charming and dry-witted and thoughtful. You're going to find me overbearing. I talk too much. I love the sound of my own words. I like to think I got better at doing this kind of thing, over 20 years. I hope I did. So forgive me for my long-windedness. I should have shut up and let Peter speak more. But it's a cool conversation. And like I said, I don't think anyone else has tape like this. So please enjoy part one of my conversation about the American Popular Songbook and the making of a CD between me and Peter Bogdanovich. We decided to give a party to inaugurate the Steinway.
Is that what the party was?
Yeah.
And when was that?
And that, I think, was in July or early August. And that was the first time I met you.
Yeah, because Tom invited me.
Yeah.
I met Tom at a party that my daughter asked me to come to. And I know Tom, and he comes over, he says, you want to come to a party, there's a piano and you could sing. He knows that I like to sing. I said, really? I said, who's going to play? He says, Raymond, very good pianist. He can play. I said, can he play better than you? He said, yeah. I said, well, then I'm sure he's got to be good then. No, I'm making this up. Anyway, I said, can he change keys? Yes.
Right.
So then I came and we were playing, and it was fun.
And it was funny because the party quickly turned into a kind of an impromptu concert, and everyone at the party thought that it was something that we had
worked up,
dreamed up. And they said, "Oh, we didn't know you knew Peter and that you guys performed together." And I just sort of lied to everyone and said, "Yes, we've been doing it for years. He comes over all the time." And then, like most good lies, it turned out to be the truth.
The truth.
Yeah.
But it was so much fun. And then Mark Lipsky comes over and says, well, you guys ought to do an album.
Right.
And I told him the name of my doctor. So you have his head examined.
How many people have come into your life and said, I want to produce something with you? And you don't even want to hear it.
No, they never. They don't do it. Nobody does it.
I always say, sure, let's do it.
Of course, do it. And then they run. But Mark did it.
To our eternal
dismay.
Chagrin.
Yes.
No, and then we
that's
played
how it started.
every couple of times a week.
We were rehearsing twice a week.
And it was sort of interesting to me is that without any real, just by kind of trying songs that each of us liked out on each other, gradually a list sort of developed. And the peculiar thing about the list is I think it took its own shape, and it kind of has its own theme. They're all songs that are, one way or another, I think, good stories.
And you helped me tremendously in singing it because you said, act it more than sing it. And acting has to do with, therefore, like you say, has to do with a story and a song that tells a story in which there's a guy that that I could play. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And sometimes songs dropped out because it didn't seem like me. Yeah,
and sort of a persona started to develop, which was who are you in this project?
That was what did it. That's what we really ended up. That's how, because there were songs that I liked that I thought, oh, I'm surely going to sing this, like Once Upon a Time. Mm-hmm. And then somehow it didn't seem to be right once we started going. It seemed not sophisticated enough.
Right.
It sort of became rather New Yorky, since we're both New Yorkers.
Yeah.
It did become sort of like, well, this doesn't seem like a New York sort of song.
There's a wonderful phrase that John Lahr used about Sondheim's music, which, of course, we don't do any Sondheim, but I think of this phrase.
We thought of you doing Sondheim.
Yeah, and wisely ran the other way. But his phrase was boulevard nihilism. And whenever I listen to the album, I think, yes, Boulevard Nihilism. It's so sophisticated and
romantic pessimism.
Yeah, yeah.
We did say at one point, I think we said, let's do all torch songs, or suicide songs.
But then we got hung up defining what a torch song is.
Yeah.
And I think one thing we found was that a lot of songs that aren't specifically about a lover carrying a torch for a lost love, songs that in fact are reasonably optimistic, can still have a sadness to them that is so poignant.
Like More Than You Know.
Yeah, More Than You Know is...
not really a torch song.
It appears to be a song about a person who's very happily telling someone how important they are to them, and yet More Than You Know is heartbreaking to me.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a yearning to it.
There's an implication that maybe one day she'll have to remember that he loved her more than she knew.
Yes, and there's a desperation in loving you the way that I do.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can do about it. It's that sort of very hard...
loving may be all you can do.
Yeah.
But baby, I can't live without it. Yeah, so she's maybe not perfect, but
right.
He sure does like her in the sack.
Yeah.
More than you know, more than you know, girl of my heart, I love you so. Lately I find you're on my mind, more than you know. Whether you're right, whether you're wrong, girl of my heart, I'll string along. I need you so, more than you'd ever know. Loving you the way that I do, there's nothing I can do about it. Loving may be all you can give, but baby, I can't live without it. Oh, how I'd cry, oh, how I'd cry if you got tired and said goodbye. More than I'd show, more than you'd ever know.
It was interesting. Some songs dropped out that we thought we'd do. You turned viciously against How Long Has This Been Going On?
Yeah. Isn't that funny?
And you always liked the song.
I always liked it.
And then you turned on it.
Because lined up against the other songs that we had chosen, it felt to me campy compared to, I think Ira Gershwin is brilliant. Certainly
it's a lovely song. We may do it sometime.
Yeah, and we had a good rendition worked up of it, and yet
it didn't work.
It
funny
wasn't.
How certain things dropped out, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I also think that, again, if the song didn't have an integrity or a clear intent as to, as you were saying, your character, and then some songs took a little bit of convincing. Like I love Deep in a Dream.
I wasn't sure about that one.
Yeah, and I think it took combining it with that old feeling.
Yeah, that was a great idea.
To make a story out of it.
You said,
really.
Let's do a medley.
Yeah, and now that tells a story.
Yeah.
I also remember, what was the song that we dropped because we started noting that there were certain characteristics of the singer, the narrator's voice in the song that we didn't like. Oh, he's self-pitying and...
Why Try to Change Me Now?
Yeah. Yeah. A terrific song.
It's a good song. Sinatra does it great. That was the other thing, of course. We did say, we can't do this. Sinatra owns this song.
Right.
every song on the album, I think, was sung by Sinatra. But then, of course, Sinatra sang every good song ever written.
Right. The distinction is always to find out, is it a song that he sang or is it a song that he owned?
Yeah, you made that distinction. You said he doesn't own this song. He
Yeah.
did do it. He does it better than anybody, but he doesn't own it. Like you can't do "I've Got You Under My Skin," for example.
Right. Why didn't we do "Where Are You," in your opinion? I have a theory.
Where are you? I don't know. I think, what did we think? It was too sappy or something? The bridge was tough.
Yeah, the bridge is tough. I think it's certainly one of my favorite songs, but I came to realize that it's a song he owns, because when you get to the end of "Where Are You," if you don't modulate up for all
night through.
Yeah. Which is what he does.
He modulates up for that.
If you don't do it, there's something essential missing from the song. It's not "Where Are You" without it, which means you have to do it just like Frank does it, which means impossible.
Maybe that's why we dropped it.
But the
singing it a few times, I didn't think I was that hot singing it either.
I think though that it's interesting, because whereas that's a song that you really can't hear without thinking of him, to me, my favorite piece that we did, which I never thought of doing, which you introduced me to, is "Monday Morning Quarterback," a song that I think maybe only he has recorded.
Yeah. And
yet I think we gave it a whole other flavor.
Well, he did it with a big band, and he did it more operatically, and we did it very intimate.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of his last recordings. It was on the "She Shot Me Down."
Mm-hmm.
I like the way he does it, but we did it quite differently.
I know there were 100 ways to tell her I loved her. It's funny how they're all so clear today. And when her face was burning with sadness and yearning, I don't know why I turned my eyes away. But it's so easy looking at the game the morning after, adding up the kisses and the laughter, knowing how you'd play it if the chance to play it over ever came. But then a Monday morning quarterback never lost a game.
Also, funny about Monday Morning Quarterback, I always felt the emotion of that song. It's a real torch song in the sense that it's not really a torch song about one person. It's sort of like just generally screwing things up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you know,
it's a life torch song.
It's a life torch song. You always screwed it up. Why did I do that? Why didn't I say this?
Yeah.
And then you took to it immediately. I mean, you loved it and you played it beautifully right away. And you liked it right away.
Mm-hmm.
That was encouraging. I think, I couldn't have done this without you, because not just because you play the piano so well, but also because you were being a director, you directed me. And that was, a number of places where it was tough to sing the song. You said things like, don't sing it so much, or why don't you speak that line?
Well, what's my, the easiest piece of direction to give is less,
Yeah, but it's, you have to say it a certain way, otherwise the guy gets up and punches you.
Right.
What do you mean less?
You don't like what I'm doing?
You don't like it?
The other great thing about this for me was in discovering the joy of doing it, and not doing it in a too professional environment. It was you and I in a relaxed environment, just having a nice time.
It was fun. We were
exploring
both having difficult summers for different reasons.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we'd come together and we could forget about whatever the outside world was about. We could just be sad playing the music, being happy playing sad music.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, most of these songs, all of the songs, to me, they transport me to it's another world that this music comes from. It's a world where you can you can say things like "loving you the way that I do." You know, it's the style that people thought in and lived in is echoed in the popular music of the 20s and 30s and 40s. That old feeling to me is a song that is so evocative of
that period.
1938. That's the way people talked and felt and spoke. That was the music that you heard on the street.
Yeah.
It was, I suppose, the equivalent of Eminem.
God forbid.
Unbelievable to think of.
Well, it's unbelievable to realize how much the world has changed.
Yeah.
When you listen to the music of that moment of the 20s, 30s, 40s, even some of the 50s, sort of started to fall apart in the 50s. But I don't know if we have any 50s songs in there.
Let's see. Well, certainly the newest is Monday Morning Quarterback, which is from the 81.
But that's a huge leap. I think most of them are what, 30s.
The 30s songs, yeah. Yeah, for the most part.
I Get Along Without You very well. I think it's even late 20s, isn't it? I don't know.
I don't know when he wrote that.
It's Hoagie Carmichael. We have two Hoagie Carmichael songs.
Yes, we have that and
Georgia on My
Mind.
Which you suggested we do, and it works.
I love the way Georgia worked out too. It's one of those songs that's been done so much, and is associated, I suppose, largely with Ray Charles and and that recording.
I used it in Paper Moon.
That's right.
With Hoagie Carmichael's recording of it.
Right. And yet it's a song that, even though it's been used so much, when you reduce it to just its words and music, it's so plaintive and
it's a great song.
Lovely, yeah. Yeah, it's lived long enough to outlive its own cliche.
Yeah, that's
value.
1930, that one.
Yeah.
But you're right, that it was partially, the fun of it was going into that era that is really vanished.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Except with small oases, where where people like us play that sort of music, but you don't hear it much.
Yeah.
Linda Ronstadt occasionally comes out and does, somebody like Linda Ronstadt decides to do a oldies song album, but.
Or now there are these, there's this woman, Stacey Kent, who's very good, and and even that seems to pose a problem for new performers doing old music. Everyone wants them to be saying something new
with the old music,
and to which I think, what more can you say except what the songs represent?
Yeah. And I think the thing you said earlier is a very important point, which is the idea that we're telling a story. Because I once asked Sinatra about it, and he said, each song is a little story with one character telling the story.
Mm-hmm.
He was such a great actor of songs too. I mean, that was really what he did, except he could sing.
When did you know Sinatra?
Well, I knew him. I met him in the mid-70s. So I knew him really sort of to talk to him between, say, 75 and 86.
So that was sort of his post-retirement comeback.
Yeah, it was that period.
Yeah. And more importantly, what was he drinking when he said that?
Jack Daniels, I think, probably. Didn't he drink that all the time? I saw him perform a few times, in London and in LA and New York. And he was a great actor of the material. He did act the material brilliantly.
Yeah.
He had a kind of extraordinary panache when he acted the songs.
Whereas Dino, who we reference in one unforgivable cut,
yes,
was the precise opposite.
Yeah, well, Dean threw them all away. He had no interest in convincing you that he meant any of it.
Right, and was equally successful somehow at the if not held in the esteem as a musician, still beloved by people who love that music. Yeah. But you're right. There's never a sincere moment.
Hardly.
Yeah. Jerry Lewis sounds more sincere
When he just sings.
Right, yeah.
It's true. We did that song, that Martin Lewis thing was, I don't know how that happened.
Well, you made the mistake of coming over one
Doing
day
Martin
and
and
doing
Lewis.
Dino, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I said,
That's right.
as I recall, I said, that's a scary Dino. I said, that was too close to him being in the room.
Anyway, it was fun
And
to do
where
that.
Dino goes, Jerry follows.
Your sweet expression, the smile you gave me, the way you looked when we met. It's easy to remember, but so hard to forget. I hear you whisper, I'll always love you. I know it's over, and yet it's easy to remember, it's so hard to forget. So I must dream to have your hand caress me, fingers press me tight. I'd rather dream than have that lonely feeling stealing through the night. Each little moment is clear before me, and though it brings me regret, it's easy to remember, but so hard to forget.
So I must dream to have your hand that caress me, fingers press me tight. I'd rather dream than have that lonely feeling stealing through the night.
Each little moment
is clear before me,
and though it brings me
regret, oh, it's easy to remember,
but so hard to forget.
We should do more of this, maybe you and me together both, huh?
Luckily, I could. I've been doing Martin and Lewis since I was about 13.
What was the thing you told me you made a tape? You used to do them together when you were a kid.
They did a radio show once. Mm-hmm. They did a radio show for a few seasons, maybe in the early 50s, and I recorded one of their radio shows. And then they had a routine. Little man, you're crying. I'm only 3 years old. I'm entitled. I know why you're blue. They're sand in my talcum powder. You know that one. Someone took your kitty car away. It was Mother. She's hated me for years. They did that. And I recorded that, and then I did it, in school for everybody. I don't remember all of it. Come along there, soldier. Take your filthy hands off me. Put away your gun. Just one shot at Mother. The war is over for tonight. That's what you think. I set a time bomb under Herbie's crib. You know.
Right. I always thought that the first time, I think we talked about this once, the first films in a way that I ever made were tape recordings. I learned that you could cut and change things around
Did you?
on tape.
I did that too.
Yeah. That was the first when I was maybe just 7 or 8 years old.
Well, I was a kid. I did the same thing with dramatic radio things, but I didn't know you could cut.
Well,
I thought
rewind and press
Yeah,
record
yeah, well,
again,
yeah, right.
That's what I did.
Yeah, rewind and press start again. Yeah.
I always
I
think
used to screw up so bad, and there was no way to fix it, so I had to just Scotch tape, and I'd tape it together, and it would go, bloop, you know.
Right.
It would make you'd hear the cut. Well, what the hell?
Isn't that a funny? Yeah, and I think now that cameras are nothing to people, it's but even when I was a kid, that I now realize those were the first.
Me too.
My first movies were made on audio tape.
That's interesting. I did it too. I actually taped an old Suspense. You're too young to remember that radio show.
Sure, I know. But...
Suspense. Autolite presents. I taped an old Suspense show and then transcribed the whole thing and then played all the parts and did my own new music and sound effects and everything. And that was the first thing I ever did was that. It was Richard Widmark in Mate Bram.
But then you played the parts?
All the parts.
Great.
I played all the parts.
And could you do Widmark?
No, I didn't do Widmark. I did me.
Right.
I played the hero in my own voice. Then there was a captain, and there was the girl. I don't know if I can do, I did all the voices. And I did all the sound effects with my usually, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, which is probably how they did them too.
Probably.
Yeah.
And then I chose rather somewhat better music. I mean, I had Stravinsky, and Mussorgsky music from my stuff. But that was the first thing I ever did too. That's weird. I didn't know that. You didn't tell me that before.
Yeah. I must think that it's. And then I remember reading something in your Wells book where he talks about how having worked in radio gave him a sense of how important the flow of the sound of the scene is.
Yeah.
And I can tell that in his work, and I can tell it in yours too. That it has a great deal to do with the sound of it. Is it sounding right? And that it'll,
Yeah, Orson said if it sounds right, it'll probably look right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember that one time when I was shooting and I looked away, and suddenly I heard a silence that I didn't want to hear. Quickly looked back and realized the actor had forgotten his lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one time I was so concerned on a picture with the camera move.
That the camera move would work, that I actually was watching the camera and didn't pay any attention to the actors. And when it was over, they said, "Do you want to print that?" And I hadn't realized I hadn't watched it.
Right.
And then I remembered what Orson had said, and I thought, well, I heard it though, and it sounded all right. Yes, print it. Very good.
If you enjoyed listening to Movies Till Dawn, you can visit my blog where I post videos related to the subjects that I interview. Just go to moviestildawn.blogspot.com. You can find this podcast at moviestilldawnpodcast.com, but we're also available on most of your favorite podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, TuneIn, Spotify, and YouTube. I would love to hear from you. If you're inspired to reach out, you can email me at moviestilldawnpodcast@gmail.com. And please feel free to follow me on Twitter at ReelRDEF. That's ReelRDEF. And if you have a film geek in your life, or even just a mildly curious fan, spread the word that we're here.